Hi guys, it's Aoife from Words of Clover and I'm here finally to do my best of 2025 video. I have 8 books to talk to you about here, so I'm going to get on straight on into it. I have talked about some of these books before in other videos, and yeah, so I might be repeating myself a little bit, but hopefully if there's any books, there might be some books that you haven't heard of before or you have forgotten about and that you want to read after watching this video, hopefully. So the first book I want to talk about is Anybody Out There by Marian. This is a book I read pretty early in 2025. It was I think it was in January, and this one we're following Anna, who is one of the Walsh sisters. This is part of the Walsh sisters or the Walsh family series, but you can read them all as standalones. And in this one we're following Anna, who is the second youngest Walsh sister, and we know that she has been living in New York and she's now back in Dublin after what appears to be quite a bad accident. She's like fairly injured and she's recuperating back in Dublin where her family can look after her, and we know she's desperate to go back to New York, to go back to her husband Aidan, who's in New York, and yeah, just get back to her life. And we kind of learn more about her life in New York, her relationship, and what happened to her, and then we just kind of follow along with the hijinks of Anna's life once she returns to New York. This book was just like really funny, quite tragic, heartbreaking. It's kind of one of those ones that you kind of like laugh and cry at the same time, and there are some great like female friendships in it. There's also like a sisterly relationship because one of Anna's sisters, Rachel, who does have her own book as well, lives in New York at the same time as Anna is living in New York, so we see that bond between the two of them as well. And yeah, I just absolutely loved this one. I was just absolutely hooked onto it, and it was just a real joy to read, and Anna became like my favourite Walsh sister after reading this book. And the next one I do have in my series is like the follow-up book about Anna, and I'm really looking forward to reading that at some point this year. The next book is one I read for the Irish Readathon, and it's Long Live Evil by Sarah Rees Brennan. Sarah Rees Brennan is one of my favourite authors. I just love her humour and just the fantastical like worlds that she creates, whether it's urban fantasy or like true fantasy, and this one I thought was just absolutely brilliant. This is one for fantasy lovers, for book lovers, for anyone who uses books, and particularly fantasy stories, to escape from reality, whether it's for a short time or a long time, for small life things or big life things. And yeah, this one was real, I feel like a real labour of love for Sarah Rees Brennan as well. As I know, she has suffered from cancer for a few years, and she kind of this book in a way was kind of about, was very personal to her, because we are following a character at the start of this book who herself is diagnosed with cancer, and she's been suffering from cancer for quite a long time, and it doesn't appear that she's going to be getting any better. And then one day she's in the hospital room, and then when she wakes up, she's basically in this her favorite book series, and she is one of the characters in the series, and the character is actually kind of like this like morally grey, like villainous type of character, and because she knows the books pretty well, she's like, okay, like I know that at this moment in time in the book I'm about to be executed the next day, so I need to like figure out how to not let that happen, because like I don't want to be executed if I'm living in this person's body within this book series. So she starts trying to like use her knowledge of the book and her knowledge of the characters to figure out the story, and she kind of ends up like changing different things about the story as she goes along. And she just like, it's just a really fun book. It's quite campy. It's not to be taken too seriously. Like there's a lot of like play around like big fantasy book tropes, which I think like Sarah Rees Brennan is doing really well, just in a really fun way. And yeah, it's just quite original. I feel like I hadn't seen this type of story done in this way before, and I absolutely loved it. I loved how it ended up. I loved the relationships between the characters. I loved this kind of like, you know, what does it mean to be like this evil character, and yeah, and then I loved kind of like the twists at the end as well, were really good. And there is a sequel coming this year which is called All Hail Chaos, also has a fantastic cover, and I really can't wait to read that as well, because this one was very good and really fun. And yeah, I might even reread that this year, I don't know, because I did have such a good time reading it. So I'm really looking forward to seeing how the series ends up. The next book is kind of like a Regency romance type of story, and that is A Lady's Guide to Scandal by Sophie Irwin. Again, Sophie Irwin, I've read 3 of her books now. 2 of them have been 5 out of 5 stars for me, and she's kind of like a real auto read author for me. I really enjoy her characters and her slow burn romance romance stories within this kind of Regency romance era. I don't know whether she's actually a Regency romance. It's more kind of like I don't know whether you call it Edwardian, maybe, like Jane Austen-y times. I don't know, Georgian, Edwardian. I'm not really sure. But in this one, we were following a character called Eliza, whose husband, who was much older than her, has died, and now she's a widow. And for the first time in her life, she kind of has a little bit of agency. She can kind of step away from her family, who are very, very controlling, and she has a little bit of money now that she is a widow. And she also doesn't have this kind of expectation of society that like a young unmarried woman would have. And for the first time ever, she can kind of just do what she wants to do. So she goes to Bath and rents a house and starts like painting again, and that's what like, you know, is kind of living her life the way she always wanted to do. And a man from her past comes back into her life, and at the same time she also meets someone new, and we kind of have these like two different, very different men, very different kind of sides of her personality as well, kind of circling around her a bit, and we don't really know what she's going to do. There are elements of persuasion by Jane Austen in this in a way that I really, really liked, but it also was its own very unique story as well. And I really loved Eliza, and I loved her character progression from like this really meek character at the very start who lets everyone talk over her to someone who really like stands up for her own rights to like live her own life near the end of the book as well, and make her own decisions. And it was just glorious to read, and the romance in this one is absolutely gorgeous. It's a really slow burn. I really love the way like Sophie Irwin really leads into the kind of like the stolen moments, the glances, the, you know, like this, the real kind of like Pride and Prejudice, like hand grip, hand flex type of moments. I feel like you really get that in this book, and I loved it. This one was like an easy 5 out of 5 stars for me, and I absolutely loved it. And yeah, I highly recommend people check it out. The next book is one that I think is on a lot of people's lists, and it's Sunrise on the Reaping by Suzanne Collins. This is Hamish's Hunger Games book, so it's kind of like a prequel book to the original Hunger Games, where we are following Hamish Abernathy in his Hunger Games, which was the second quarter quell, which we all know that he wins because obviously he is in the original trilogy. And we are just following what actually happened to Hamish during his games, and this one is really just like fan service. It's just a lot of lore around the Hunger Games, and I just ate this up. I loved it. I did see some people complain that there was a lot of fan service, the fact that you see a lot of like beloved characters from the original trilogy come into this one, and like, do they really need to be there? And my answer is, I don't care. I loved seeing them. I loved seeing their connection to Hamish. I loved seeing the kind of start of this rebellion that we see in the original Hunger Games that Katniss and Peeta end up being like dragged into. And I think it makes so much sense to see how it built up over 25 years, that like what Katniss ended up becoming the spokeswoman for. You know, it didn't just appear out of nowhere. They were just waiting for their right moment. They were just building and building and building underneath and waiting for the right moment and the right person to really burst everything open. And Katniss was that person. But over this really long period of time, Hamish and others were just like building up to it. And I loved seeing the start of that with Hamish's book. It was just really interesting, and for anyone who is a big fan of the Hunger Games, I feel like they would get a lot out of it. And even if like, you know, you don't really care about the other characters, I think it's just a good Hunger Games book. It shows how brutal it is. But yeah, I absolutely love this, and yeah, it was just really, really fun. The next book I want to talk about is Ordinary Saints by Niamh Mhaoileoin. And this is an Irish book. It is a debut author, and this is one I listened to an audiobook, and I really, really enjoyed an audiobook. And we are following a character called Jacinta, or Jay. She prefers to be known as Jay. She's living in London when we meet her. But we know that when she was younger, her brother was training to be a priest, and he unfortunately had a really tragic accident and he died. And at the start of this book, we find out that he's basically like on like about to be like, he's on this like kind of thing where they want to canonize him into becoming a saint. And like, I just find that journey itself is really interesting, of like, how does someone become a saint? Like, what does this mean for like a very ordinary family, for like their loved one who they grieve every single day, to suddenly be a saint and to maybe mean something to like people who never knew him, never met him. Like, how does all that work? So we see a lot of Jacinta's kind of really complicated feelings about what she thinks about this, about her brother becoming a saint, her own relationship with her brother. She's very close to him, she loved him a lot, obviously, but then her relationship with her parents, which is quite strained now, and then also her relationship with religion and her relationship with her child, like her memories of her childhood growing up, as how we know now she is a gay woman, and she's living in London and living in a very kind of Catholic, rural, upbringing, and yeah, like her family not knowing like some things about her, and yeah, we just kind of see a lot of that delved into in this book, and I just absolutely loved it. I just thought it was absolutely brilliant. It's a really great exploration into just like complicated family dynamics, sibling relationships, grief is really heavy in this book, but I think it's done really, really well in terms of like someone can be dead like over 20 years or like like a really long time, and then you could have a day where it feels like they had just died the day before. Like that grief is so heavy and so intense, and like when you love someone, that like deep grief doesn't really go away. You just kind of learn to live with it, and I loved how this book explored that as well. And then I also just really appreciated that it explored what it's like, that this Catholic Ireland, kind of old school, kind of heavy, like religious fever almost, in some households and in some families, and it was kind of explored in a way that wasn't like insulting or demeaning to anyone who does believe or who does hold a faith, and I just appreciated that as well. So yeah, this was just excellent. The fact that it was a debut novel, I was like, I'm going to read everything that Niamh writes now, because yeah, this was really, really good, and yeah, I loved it. The next one is a fun kind of crime mystery book, and it is The Devil's Advocate by Steve Cavanagh. Steve Cavanagh is an Irish author, but the series is set in America. We follow a character called Eddie Flynn, who is a defense attorney in New York, and this one he's actually called out of New York to this kind of southern town, I think it's Mississippi, to defend this young black boy who's been accused of killing a young girl in this town. And we are going into kind of like this town that feels like it's still in like the Jim Crow era. It's very divided. There's like really heavy racism involved in this case as well. And one of the things about this case is that it's like the DA of this like district, or like the person who's kind of like putting this guy up for murder, he basically is kind of like a serial killer himself, in terms of like even when he knows people are innocent, he will go for the death penalty because he just wants to see these people die in the chair because he gets off on it. So like he doesn't care if this young person is innocent or guilty, he just wants him to die because he feels that he's probably done something at some point that warrants him to die in this chair, and he just loves seeing people die. So this one was just like, it was quite heavy obviously in terms of like the racial kind of slurs and attacks and just kind of some violence in it. It makes you really, really angry reading it, that people kind of live like this and think like this. But it was also like a real kind of edge of my seat. I didn't really know, there were times I didn't know how like Eddie was going to like find a way to get this client off, and even if he did get off, how would they be safe, like how would this all work out? And it was just really fun to be able to see, and also like how they would get out of it safely, because like their lives are kind of like, it feels like in danger at times as well, like Eddie and his team, it feels like they might not like get out of this unscathed either. Yeah, this one was just really good. It felt like kind of like almost like a movie sometimes when I was watching it. Like I was like, I can see this on screen, like either as part of a TV show or like a movie. And yeah, I just loved kind of seeing how it all came together, and like the court case, and how Eddie worked his way around to really try his best for this boy. And yeah, it was really, really fun. So I really, really enjoyed it. The next one was one that, it wasn't like a 5-star, but it's one that when I think about my reading experience, I just really, really enjoyed. And this was So Thrilled for You by Holly Bourne. Now, I did read this one. This is all about like motherhood and kind of expectations on women, what women are celebrated for versus what's not celebrated that much, postpartum, pregnancy, infertility, all these kind of things, friendship dynamics, how friendships can be strained through all these kind of things. And I was fairly heavily pregnant when I read this. I was like 9 months pregnant when I read this, so there was just a lot of things in it that really resonated with me, which I think added to the reading experience of it overall. But we are following a group of friends who are all gathering in this one of the girls' parents' house for a baby shower, and we see just like one of them is like, you know, she's pregnant and she's just like really not enjoying being pregnant. One of them is has like a almost 1 year old, I think, and she's really struggling with postpartum depression and just stress and looking after a young person. She's just finding it really hard. Another character has been dealing with infertility, and then I think the fourth character is someone who doesn't want children. She is kind of like happily child free, but she feels like her own personal kind of achievements aren't celebrated the way like an engagement is or a pregnancy announcement, and she's kind of feeling a little bit like resentful of that as well, and rightfully so. And we just kind of see how a lot of these things are like combined and combust in a way that does actually lead to we know at the very start there's like this big fire, and we're kind of figuring out what the hell happened and how this fire happened, and did someone set the place on fire on purpose. I just thought this was, again, a really good look at both motherhood, female friendships, like the stresses that women put themselves and others through in like different ways, and the expectations that we can put on ourselves to look perfect and be perfect all the time. And yeah, I just thought it was really fun. It was really well written. I read it really quickly, and as I said, I think I just read it at like a really good point in my life as well. That yeah, I just resonated a lot with it. So, and then the last book I want to talk about is The Raven Scholar, and this one is one that just like ticked that like big chunky fantasy book itch that I had, that I didn't even know I had, because I feel like I don't know whether it's like I don't have the time anymore, or I don't give myself the time anymore to read those big chunky fantasies, especially like new fantasies that I hear about. I feel like I don't pick them up as often anymore, even though I do love them when I do find a really good one. And this is one that I just like ate up. I loved it. We are in this world where there is an emperor, and there are like a few different sects. They're kind of like, it's kind of like a religion. They all follow this particular god that takes the form in the shape of an animal, and every so many years, I can't remember how many years it is, but however many years, the emperor steps down and a new emperor takes place, and basically each sect has their own kind of competitor, and they could participate in these trials to figure out who is going to be the next emperor out of all of these sects. And we are following a character called Niamh, who is in the Raven, and the Ravens are kind of like the scholars. They kind of do a lot of like the admin like work within this kingdom. And for example, we have like the fox, like there's the foxes who are a bit wily and cunning, and they tend to be kind of assassins. And then we have the tigers, who are like the warriors, and the ox are people who kind of work the land and might do like architecture and stuff like that. So like everyone kind of has their own jobs and what they kind of do to keep this kingdom running. We are following a character called Niamh, who is kind of someone who is close enough to the current emperor, and when one of the competitors for the next emperor trials is killed, she is like charged to investigate what the hell happened, how could this happen, who has killed this person, and she ends up getting involved in these trials in a way that like she never expected to, and her life is in danger all the time doing this as well. And we just follow along. There's a lot of like political intrigue and kind of trickery and treachery, and you don't know who to trust, and it is just really fun. I really loved it. I thought it was a great first book in, I don't know whether it's going to be a duology or a trilogy, and yeah, it was just really good. I was like hooked onto every bit of this, and the fact that I was able to read this within like, I think I read it within a week, while I had like a very young newborn. I think Clodagh was only a few weeks old when I read this. Goes to show how good it is, because yeah, I couldn't put this down even though I was looking after a baby. So yeah, I can't wait for the next book. I don't know whether it's coming out this year or next year, but I will definitely be reading it. And yeah, this is one I highly recommend, and as I said, ticked that like fantasy, just really got that fantasy like urge and reminded me of why I love fantasy so much. And yeah, So those are all the books that I read and loved in 2025. Please let me know if you guys have read any of these books, what you guys think, what was your best book of 2025. I would love to know. And thank you guys so much for watching as always, and I'll see you guys again next time.